This evening we're talking about the Malachite Man. This has been controversial because it's a find that's not where it is supposed to be according to the evolutionary scenario. Humans in the same layer with dinosaurs. Here is the property owned by the mining company. This is the road that was cut in 1930. Prior to the time the road was cut, this hill just continued right across, and then the mining operation began. We'll look at a close-up, and there we see the road and the property. The 30s excavation covered this area, and then the 70s went further down in this area as it approached the road. This is the site, the particular spot, where the bulldozer uncovered the first finds toward the road down at the level that had been reached by the 70s excavation. Pictures appeared and articles appeared in a number of magazines, I think, giving a fairly accurate rendition of what had been found and of the obvious problems that were involved. Here we have human bones in the lower Cretaceous, the Dakota sandstone, found back in the early 70s. But nevertheless, there are parts of two perfectly modern individuals 50 feet down in the Dakota sandstone, supposed to be 140 million years old. The bones themselves vary in the degree of replacement. Some of them are almost modern looking, as are many very old bones. Many dinosaur bones are fresh. Some of them are almost completely replaced, as is this bone. This bone I personally excavated, washed it off with a canteen. It had been out of the ground less than 5 minutes when I was holding it here and the picture was taken. It's a vibrant green. And from the flesh tones there, you can tell that that's a pretty good rendition of the color of those bones, replaced by a copper salt, by malachite. Some of them are turquoise, which likewise is a salt associated, a copper salt associated with copper. And here is the jawbone that is just perfectly replaced. The teeth are jewelry grade turquoise. Sorry, that's just turquoise. Perfectly replaced. I don't think that's a modern burial. This is where the 70s find was. The finds of the 90s, where the rest of the bones were found more at this location. And the entire site of where they were found is at roughly the same level, but over an area 50 by 100 feet. So it's a very broad area where they're found, not in one spot. Looking at a closer view, you can see actually some of the bones sticking out of the ground here at this spot. There's another skeleton over there where they're working. But this is typical of the undisturbed, semi-lithified middle layer, if you please, of the Dakota sandstone. Looking closer, you can see she's excavating this bone that is embedded in the rock. Here we see she's taking it down further, and now we see another knee over here showing up. This is one of the few, actually only two, were articulated. They weren't completely articulated. The lower portion, that is, was together as in life. Most of them were just bones piled into place, not articulated. But this one was. We can see the pelvis here. Here's the femur, the foot. Here's the pelvis over here. And then as it's further excavated, you can see the pelvis still embedded in the rock. Here is the second leg behind here, still even more embedded. This was the nearby skeleton. I say skeleton. This is a pile of bones. These are not associated. These two may look like they go together like a knee. This is a femur, but this does not go with the femur any more than these two. These were just washed into place, and this is a pile of ribs, not necessarily oriented as in life, but in general, but not certainly not articulated, which is typical of most of the finds. But this is rock. You can also see the harder layers up above. This is what the bulldozers ran into. This is the base of the 30s excavation, and this, of course, is the base of the 70s excavation. and the spot where the skeletons were found. How do we explain this? What's the most reasonable explanation? Is it a mining accident? Well, there's some very obvious negative indications of that. First, there's no evidence of tunnels. They're dispersed over the wide area of 50 by 100 feet, which doesn't sound like a group huddled together in a mining accident. If it happened after 1930, we would have known about it. 10 people killed in a mining accident. If it was before 1930, then you'd have to have a tunnel 200 feet long, and there's no evidence of it. And the one who was driving the bulldozers just devoutly affirmed that there was no cracks, there was no break in the layers anywhere. There were 4 females and an infant in the total of 10, which doesn't sound like a mining operation, does it? Sound like a group of people that got caught in a catastrophe, washed into place. There were no crushed bones. If you got a mining accident, you got crushed bones. And, top it off, no tools. That just doesn't look like a mining accident. Well, could it have been a recent burial? Well, there are just all kinds of negative indications here. 50 feet down in the Dakota sandstone, under undisturbed hard layers. Now, some people like to bury them pretty deep, I guess, but now that's a little absurd. And why would you, through rock that was tearing up bulldozers? Most of the skeletons were not articulated, which is what you would expect for a recent burial. The degree of mineral replacement is likewise counterindicative of a recent burial. The range of radiocarbon dates up to 1400 years, and no collagen, is just virtual proof these are not recent burials. Now, what could it have been? Well, maybe an ancient burial. Here, all of these factors then become positive indications, don't they? An ancient catastrophic burial, together under the hard layers, buried in the catastrophe, would be a kind of thing we'd expect. Some articulated, perhaps, most unarticulated. The fact that there's no collagen and the range of radiocarbon dates is exactly what we would predict. That model fits. A catastrophic ancient burial, not recent, fits this picture. In fact, maybe we can best explain it with a cartoon I saw the other day that looked like this. These were them that were buried in the catastrophe that missed the boat. The evidence summarized then involves first realizing this column, what's causing all the problem, that's causing people to work so hard to say this can't be what it looks like it is simply a conceptual correlation to start with, and its purpose is not proof, and it's not in concrete. It is to be used as a test, and here it fails the test. Living fossils abundantly falsify the concept of extinction, which is fundamental to the building of that column. And the evolutionary progression is falsified. This is the chin-out test, the potential falsification for the theory as proposed by Dawkins. And it is falsified by the Malachite Man, where we have 10 humans in the layer, not dinosaurs at this place, but in that layer. And by the way, the fact that that layer continues for over 1,000 miles is also indication of a catastrophe, not of local extent, but continental extent. Likewise, the Morrison Formation is thousands of miles in extent. These are continental layers. They're not local deposits. And some of them are literally global and can be traced around the globe. I think Dawkins' criteria is met, and it's falsified. He says if a single well-verified mammal skull were to turn up in 500 million-year-old rocks, the whole modern theory of evolution would be utterly destroyed. Well, mammal skull, let's just take a whole mammal skeleton, 10 humans, not 500 million years, but as he acknowledged even from the Carboniferous, human bones would blow the theory of evolution out of the water. It is falsified by the very criteria criterion that he sets forth. Stephen Stanley made this statement in detail, and let's conclude looking at what he had to say about it. He talked about the topsy-turvy fossils. Let's look at the context of that statement. He said there's an infinite variety of ways in which since 1859 the general concept of evolution might have been demolished. Consider the fossil record, little known resource in Darwin's day. The unequivocal discovery of a fossil population of horses in Precambrian rocks would disprove evolution. More generally, any topsy-turvy sequence of fossils would force us to rethink our theory, yet not a single one has come to light. And of course won't until he looks. We've invited him to Glen Rose. We've invited him out to Utah. He refuses to come. He continues saying, as Darwin recognized, a single geographic inconsistency would have nearly the same power of destruction. You don't have to have a whole lot. He said just one. Darwin said the same thing.